All right. Welcome.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for coming, Ahmed
Yep.
Zobi. Please let us know what your name, title is, and what you work on.
Yes. So my name is Ahmed Zobi. I'm the CEO of Sinter Health Technologies, a medical device company that spun out from our senior design class at UCI.
Perfect. And what disease conditions do you work with, and what's important to know about them?
So we are expanding into various diseases. We started off with diabetic ulcers and diabetic wound care. We've received FDA clearance, so we're doing aesthetics at the same time while doing the diabetic wound care side. We're looking to expand into breast cancer reconstructive surgery, knee osteoarthritis, pain for knee OA, canine osteoarthritis, so a bunch of things. And the beauty of it is because we developed a platform technology that truly has multiple uses, that it can be, multiple use cases.
Great. Historically, before this platform technology existed, what was done, at least for maybe diabetic ulcers and breast cancer?
Yeah. So what our device does, I think it's really important to say this real quick, is it processes the patient's own fat tissue to be re-injected back in. So we take fat out, we re-inject it, or we process it, sorry, and then we re-inject it back into the patient. So in the aesthetic side, we're injecting into the face. In the diabetic foot ulcer side, we're injecting underneath and subdermal to the wound. For breast cancer reconstructive surgery, so what currently is done today is there's a lot of mesh. Actually, with breast cancer, it's kind of a little bit more archaic. They just take the tissue out, and if you don't have a good plastic surgeon there, they just patch you up, and it's a really horrible thing to do, I believe, for women that have gone through basically hell and back. So what some people do is they put a breast implant. Now that's being said that it could potentially cause cancer again. So they're finding other things that they can put in there. For diabetic foot ulcer, it's the same old thing that it's been done for eons now. It's the main standard of care is just stay off the foot. So imagine you have this gnarly, huge wound on the bottom of your foot, and your doctor's like, stay off of it. And if you don't, then it gets bigger, and then you lose your foot. There's high risk of amputation. If you can afford it, if you have good health insurance and or money, you can probably afford skin substitutes. So these are like artificial skin cells that are made from donated, neonatal foreskin, fibroblasts from other humans. Problem is that it's donated, so there's a potential for rejection. And that's what led us to developing, a technology that can truly process and automate the processing of autologous, so from your own body, fat tissue that can then be reused in those use cases.
And then you mentioned for aesthetics as well, what was historically done there?
So fat transfer is very common. There's also, everyone has heard of Botox and Botox is more for wrinkle reduction. It's not really good for volumization. So as we age, fat migrates south, and you kind of get that loss of laxity, etc. And what currently is done is a lot of people get fillers. You see, everyone gets fillers. Hollywood actresses, everyone's getting fillers now. The problem with fillers, though, is that it makes you look unnatural because it's synthetic. Yes, hyaluronic acid is naturally produced in the human body, but not to that effect of like quantities amount of just blob in your face, right? So I when you look at hyaluronic acid being poured out, it literally looks like PDMS or epoxy stacked on top of each other. So it's really disgusting. And now they're looking at reformulating it to allow for maybe less thickness, more porosity, so that the body can naturally go through. So there's Botox for wrinkles, there's hyaluronic acid for fillers, there's current fat transfers, but a lot of the fat transfers, if not all the fat transfers, are done manually. So they manually process the fat. Hell, even some doctors take the fat that they just sucked out of the patient via liposuction, they put it into what's it called, a strainer, a kitchen strainer, and then they pour it all out. They wait for the blood to go down, and then they just get a spoon and they're just like scooping it up into syringes. And it's like this is medieval, right? So what we did is we said, hey, you know what? yeah, there are other devices out there. They're all manual. Let's create an automated system that can process the fat tissue without the patient, and that's, or without the doctor. And that's what we've developed here. So these bad boys can fill up with fat tissue. You attach it to the other consumable. So this is a microfluidic chip. And as the fat tissue goes back and forth, it gets sized down and broken down into finer particles.
Very cool. So was that a recent improvement, the device you just showed there? Or?
So this was, so we have more improvements. So this was an older version, I would say probably a year, 2 years ago. I mean, we as a startup and as a broke startup is a better way to say it. We had to iterate a lot in a short amount of time. So we literally took, concepts that we validated within a week, and we iterated. I think we've gone through at least 50 to 75 different designs before landing on this one and what we're currently working on today. So it was definitely a huge engineering R&D project, and we had to do it for cheap. So we validate, we quickly get done. And 3D printing is what really helped set that off.
Very cool. So for the three sort of major applications that you mentioned, I know you mentioned canine and you have a lot of applications, but maybe for the overall major applications that you're at least doing validation for, what further improvements do you think can be made in the future?
So the main two focuses right now are the diabetic wound care and the aesthetic. And when you say major improvements, are you talking about device or to the market in general as a whole?
Anything.
So for our device, we're gaining traction right now on processing larger volumes. So we started off doing very low volume. So this bad boy here could do about 15 cc's of fat tissue. We've validated up to 100 cc's right now, and we're validating up to about a liter to a liter and a half of fat tissue. So that's a lot of fat. That's more for like buttocks augmentation, etc. But with regards to the diabetic wound healing and the aesthetics, it's clinical trial data. It's validating that this actually works. And we're looking to hopefully in the very near future publish said data showing the safety and efficacy. So, and this is, at least on the diabetic wound care side, it's really changing the field in a sense, because we're creating a one-time use, procedure. Whereas a lot of the other things on the market today, you're slapping that skin substitute on either weekly or bi-weekly basis. So average cost is 17,000 a patient in the US average. There are some patients that we've interviewed through NSF I-Corps program that have paid $250,000 out of pocket, and their insurance company has paid $10 million for their wounds. So it ranges, it's crazy. So for the diabetic foot ulcer side, really it's providing that one-time use, no need for, another injection. And even if there is a need, at least it will be, a lot more affordable and cheaper in the long run, right? On the aesthetic side, it's the consistency, the reproducibility, the repeatability, because all of it right now is manual. So that whole field, the doctor can process fat a different way, another doctor can process fat another way. And if they both treated the same patients, they're going to get two different results. Even though they're doctors, they've gone through, they're board certified, some of them are double board certified, they've gone through intense amount of training, they will never get equal results. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to take it out of their hands and put it into a box and say, this box will get you that equal result. You just have to inject at the end of the day, right? And I think that's where we're moving towards. We're shifting more towards not just personalized medicine, but more on the repeatability and consistency of patients.
And my last question is, what advice do you have for our students and potential entrepreneurs and innovators out there?
So for me, on the student side, if you are looking to become an entrepreneur, you should start early. Time in my opinion, is one of those few things that we have an abundance of. You know, I've been working with my team on this for the last, since starting BME in 2015 as on our senior year. It will be 7 years this October, you know. Um, and one of the biggest issues for us was funding, you know, so that's why I say start early, validate early on, because by the time you reach whether senior year or you're graduating, at least the product, you know, it would be this version of it, right? Like as I mentioned, this is 6 years in the making right here. Whereas we started off with laser cutting and sticking two pieces of plastic together with double-sided adhesive. You know, it's not something that you would want to have done on you, you know. Yeah, sure, process it in that and inject it back in. But no, it's what was needed to get to where we are today. So start early. As students, and this is something that I tell all the students that I mentor, whether it's through the coaching, through the business plan competition, as students, you do not know how lucky you are. You have access to every business plan competition in the United States as college students, any college business plans, any business plans in general that say you have to be less than X amount of money invested in your company. You have access to all of that. There's literally tens of millions of dollars out there up for grabs. And if you start early on, at least by the time you know your second time, third time reapplying to that competition, you might get in. You know what I mean? And it's right before you graduate or even right before you start your senior year. So you'll have that momentum going for you where the idea is being validated. And it's being validated as your students, which I think is the easiest thing to do. Yes, you have the difficulties of classes and all that other stuff, but when you're working on something that you're passionate about, you make that time and it gets done, right? So that's what my advice would be. Start early, use and abuse all the resources that you have available to you. Again, those business plan competitions, those you know, sessions where they teach you certain things about business. I don't know if I should do a plug, but one incubator that I really liked that I wish that I had done before I started Sinter was Texas Mass Challenge, because it really shows you from start to finish on taking an idea and making it into a reality, right? So you learn all those business knowledge that I had to learn by myself in the real world and get those battle scars and those wounds. When we participated in Mass Challenges competition and the incubator was teaching us all of this stuff, I was like, damn, I wish we got into this, you know, because then we would have known all of this stuff and we would have avoided a lot of issues and moved on. So again, to summarize, there's a lot of resources out there. As college students, you are one of the luckiest populations because once you graduate, you might have a year, maybe 2 years at most to apply to certain competitions, but that's it. So start early. Customer discovery is very important. So I'm gonna do a shameless plug for NSF I-Corps. The NSF I-Corps program was really instrumental to us pursuing Sinter. And I know the NIH has an NIH I-Corps as well. I know there's certain rules attached to it, but NSF is free. There's multiple nodes, you know, here in California, especially at UCI. Participate it, get your $2,500 or $3,000, travel the US, interview people, understand your problem that you're trying to solve. Because I see too many students that come to me and tell me like, hey, we have this issue, but then it never ends up being a true issue.
Great. All right. Thank you. Anything else you want to say? Any last words before we head out?
No, I mean, ultimately, you know, you have alumni like us, you have, you know, your professors and stuff. So I would, you know, anyone can always contact me if I'm free. I always give, you know, free advice and I help where I can help out as much as possible. But my vision for the world is to truly see a larger population of students creating not just ideas, but truly defined, focused, and validated ideas, right? Because you know, there's everyone and their mother is making an idea or an invention or anything like that, right? It's how do you stand out in that crowd? And the way to stand out is is to kind of not be so deeply focused in making it perfect. It's truly, it's like, hey, we just need to validate. We'll move on. We'll make it perfect. We will always have time to optimize design or make it perfect or make it work this way. Let's just validate. Let's just see if it conceptually works. And once you start seeing those happening, at the end, what you end up designing, any manufacturer, any engineer can come in and be like, hey, I prettied it up. You know what I mean? I made it look nice. At the end of the day, our core tech is like, the holding and the channel design, like all of that. You don't need it to look a certain shape, form, whatever. It's truly just conceptually, does it work? So ultimately, what I tell people is to not focus so much on the detail. Get doctors involved, talk to doctors, if you're solving a medical case, right? Unmet clinical need. Get them involved early on. Get IRB approvals or exemptions early on before you even go down the pathway of the FDA. Validate. Because half the times, like there are companies that I know that they go to clinical trial sites and then the doctor's like, whoa, you told me something completely different. Now there's like 3 steps that I have to do while operating your thing, and you told me it was easy. And then all of a sudden they're pissed off. The patient's knocked out in the OR, and the doctor's like, I'm not going to use this anymore, right? So what I've learned is having them as a part of a clinical board of advisors, and there's a lot of good people out there that will do it for free. It is your responsibility as a company to give them pay or equity or whatever it might be. I'm not advising anything here, but it is your responsibility to keep them, in the loop and a part of your business. So, there are good and bad ways of doing it, but please bring in those minds early on, because otherwise you're developing a solution for yourself. You know what I mean? You hear about a problem and you're just thinking about it, well, this is how I would solve it. You're not the doctor. You don't know the steps that they're going through. You don't know what the OR room is like. Unless you've interned, then by all means, go ahead. Props to you. But definitely bring these minds early on into your company or your idea.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.